The Ballad of Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read by Jim Nail, Chapter 4, Cornfest, Part 2, The Musicians. A strum of strings and a rattle of gourds. Musicians were setting up on a low platform at one end of the shelter. Johnny looked around. "Where's my backpack? I left my backpack at the silo." "We've got your backpack," said one of the hoop girls. "Here it is." I have a mandolin in there. I want to join the musicians." Johnny could almost feel the melodies streaming like light out of his fingers. He stood up so quickly the hoop girls had to steady the chair to keep it from falling over. "Here, is this a mandolin?" There were 2 guitars and 2 fiddlers. One of the fiddlers was a girl. Another girl was playing with a selection of gourd shakers and seed pod rattlers. A young man had a gut string fastened to a metal bucket and secured at the top to a broom handle. He twanged the strings and pulled the handle, changing the pitch of the thumping bass notes. "Let me join you." Johnny jumped up on the platform. "Arcane!" exclaimed one of the guitarists, a broad-shouldered man with a wealth of beard on his chin, but only a scrub of hair on his head. "Hey, look! Arcane plays the turtle box." "What do you know, Arcane?" "I know everything. You name it, I'll play it." "Well, how about the cabbage moth?" "Goes like this." But before the guitarist could play a single note, Johnny launched into the opening strains of the cabbage moth. And they were off. They rambled through the cabbage moth at a leisurely pace, the gut string thumping, gourds rattling like a pepper of hailstones. People turned, started to clap, and sway from side to side. Someone shouted, "Look! Arcane plays the turtle box." "The wind in the cornrows," called the guitarist, who was clearly the leader. This was a jig tune, and they played a little faster. Lines of dancers began to form. The gut string player, a skinny, curly-haired boy, beamed a big smile at Johnny and picked up the pace. The girl on the fiddle started to laugh, and the guitarist called out, "Down the drain," as they swerved into a stovepipe rhythm. Johnny felt his fingers and his spirits lift with joy. Never before had he played with such able and good-hearted musicians. They played late into the night. They played "Piggy with a Whistle," "Up the Ladder and Down the Chute," "Here Comes Trouble," "The Quilt with No Corners," "The Dog That Licked the Platter Clean," "The Milky Mountain," "Don't Touch Me with Your Dirty Hands," "All We Have Is What We Know," "The Perils of Pig Dancing," "The Blushing Seamstress," "Border Binder's Retreat." Soon the field was full of dancers, each dance appropriate to the tune. Line dances for the reels, squares for the stovepipes, and couples danced the waltzes and the jingle jangles. Lanterns were lit, slabs of pork were passed around, and steins of ale were raised and drained. But the musicians did not drink. Fueled by the music, they pressed on from song to song, laughing each other in the face as they swapped changes and solos and navigated through the keys. The girl on the fiddle watched Johnny intently. It seemed like her eyes were only for him. But the skinny gut-string boy was all over the place, his smile as wide as a river, sometimes throwing his head back in a swoon, while the guitarist dictated the rhythm with his beard bobbing over the strings, and he was the one to call out the name of each new tune. It was well past midnight when it ended. The crowd had thinned, but the energy of the music had not dwindled. It just stopped abruptly. They were climbing through the last chorus of the Bandit's Repentance and into its precipitous coda, and when they struck the last high note, it just ended like that. Silence. It was because the guitarist failed to call another tune, as if he had exhausted his entire repertoire of titles. After a moment of recognition, the remains of the crowd broke into a weary but heartfelt applause, and the musicians melted into laughter, handshakes, hugs, back-thumping, and foot-stomping, all except for the lead guitarist. That is, he just sat there staring at his fingers in puzzlement. "Let's get something to eat," cried the gut-string boy. "Yow, yow, yow," the rest agreed, and they tumbled off the platform, leaving the guitarist still bewildered on his bench. Presently they returned with meat and beer, and some for the guitarist as well. He was still sitting in a sort of stupor, running his fingers silently over his guitar strings. But when he saw the meat, his face lit up. "There's one we didn't play," he beamed a smile, "from pig to pork." The fiddle girl sat on the floor next to Johnny, and after a while she became bold enough to rest a hand on his knee. It was a strong, freckled, sunburned hand. He looked at her face, a farm girl's face, round as the moon, hair the color of corn. She was older than he. "What's your name?" he asked her. "Aunt," she replied. "What, you mean like your mother's sister?" No, ant, like the bug that lives in the ground. It's short for Antellomarine. But that name is very hard to say. The gut-string boy slapped his gut-string. "We can't stop now. Look at the moon." All heads turned to observe an enormous, bone-white moon climbing above the open field where the dancers were gradually dispersing. "We've got to play that moon clear across the sky." The man fiddler and two of the three guitarists were already packing up their instruments, and the gourd girl had never returned from the food gathering. "Gotta work tomorrow, Jocko," said the man fiddler. "Not too loud, okay? You don't want to be waking the children." Soon there were just the four of them. Johnny, the lead guitarist, Jocko, the gut-string boy, and Aunt, who was now resting her head on Johnny's shoulder. "I know how we can do it," said Johnny. "I know a way we can keep playing without having to know any more songs." The guitarist sat up abruptly. He looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "We know lots more songs." Johnny chuckled. "I don't think I do. But listen to me. Do what I say. Believe me. I promise this will work. Untune your instruments." "Untune? How do you untune?" "Like this." Johnny grasped the mandolin and skewed each of the 8 pegs randomly in either direction. He strummed the strings once. It sounded a little like a table full of kitchen utensils falling over. "You do that with your guitar." The guitarist just gaped, dumbfounded, at his fretboard. Johnny grew impatient. "Do it!" He reached out for the neck of the guitar and twisted 3 of the pegs. guitarist pulled away and hunched his shoulders with his back to the others. But after a moment, he raised his left hand and untuned the rest of the strings. "Can't untune my instrument," said Jocko as he thumped the string. "Got no pegs." "Well, you're lucky then. You can go anywhere." Johnny glanced at Aunt. Her chin to the fiddle, she was plucking each string and cocking her ear to it as if to make sure it was properly out of tune. "Jocko, just start. Play something." Jocko launched into a sloppy rhythm, unanchored to any tonality. "Forget the songs. Just listen and play what you feel." The guitarist kept his back turned, leaning into his instrument, brushing the frets, trying to comprehend the concept. Aunt was the first to join in. Obediently, she drew her bow across the strings, producing a dissonant squawk against Johnny's tentative plucking. Johnny smiled at her in encouragement and admiration, and something like desire. But an image quickly rushed in to replace it. Lucy. Lucy, whose fiddle was always untuned, who sometimes spoke and sang in a different language and knew how to move the dough through the air with her fingers. Lucy, who was a fugitive from some kind of cruelty she would not disclose, and who would not leave the shelter of the bathhouse for fear this cruelty would catch up with her. Lucy, whose small body fit so perfectly in his sheltering arms. At that moment, it became clear to him there was a tether between them that would never be cut. His reverie was broken by a loud clang. The guitarist had figured it out. There was something defiant about his announcement, like a boast or a challenge, and there was a grip of resolution on his face, but all the while he was staring straight at the fiddler's freckled fingers. Johnny quickly answered with a strum of equal force. Jocko kicked the bucket with his foot. Aunt jumped back, startled. Then she grasped the bow and struck the strings as if she were beating a rug. For a moment, it looked like there was going to be a battle. The cacophony was anything but harmonious. But then Jocko found a rhythm, a soothing canter, and it wasn't long before everyone was anchored to it. The guitarist tried to race ahead for a while, but the backbeat was too infectious. Eventually, he relaxed his shoulders, widened his fingers, and turned his ear to the strange and wondrous sound that was being born. Something like wind and rain and laughter, the call of swans flying over, the rush of rivers. Aunt played her fiddle deftly. She was clearly more rooted in tradition than Lucy ever was. But as the night moved on, her melodies veered into more and more unfamiliar territory. The guitarist just played it straight, fingering the chords and strumming the strings as if it were any other day. But he was moonstruck for sure. He craned his neck to the shared space between them, his attention rapt. After a while, he got up and walked around, weaving between the other musicians, listening to the interplay. And indeed they did play that moon clear across the sky. Perhaps it was Johnny's experience with Lucy that kept him going and goaded the others on. But the guitarist himself had opened up, his hands once bone stiff, softened like candle wax. Aunt was willing, and Jocko just lifted his face in trance-like bliss while he made love to his single string. Very late, the music slowed and stilled, but did not diminish in intensity. There were crickets singing. Everyone heard them, and left silences between the notes to welcome their songs. It was then that Johnny looked out across the field and saw the dancers, men and women, twirling in white gowns lit by moonglow. 6 or 7 of them moved slowly at distances from each other. They held their arms aloft, dipped and swooned, swayed, joined hands in circles, pulled apart, leaping and folding until the moon sank below the western ridge. And suddenly they were gone.